this is just the beginning.
Good afternoon, and welcome to a celebration of public service. For the Partnership for Public Service and Axios, I'm Adrienne Warren. Today we announce the finalists for the 2021 Samuel J. Heyman Service to America Medals. 29 individuals or teams in our federal government who have accomplished the extraordinary on behalf of all of us. The public servants you'll meet today, our nation's unsung heroes, remind us of what is great about those who serve: selfless dedication to helping others, a desire to improve lives and communities, a spirit of possibility against all odds. They remind us that we are all capable of greatness. For the past 20 years, the Partnership for Public Service has shared and celebrated those incredible stories through the Service to America Medals, better known as the Sammys. Whether it's developing the next generation of medical treatments or expanding our understanding of the universe, caring for our veterans, or addressing the needs of the economically marginalized, federal employees are there on the front lines, and that was especially true this year, as public servants at all levels led the fight against COVID-19. In fact, this year the partnership added a new COVID-19 response category to the Sammys program to pay tribute to the astounding work in this realm. We'll highlight stories from this incredible group, among others. I'm excited for you to meet some of this year's finalists, but first, a brief video to explain more about the partnership's work.
The Partnership for Public Service is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to making our federal government work better. We are a unique asset. There are 150 million nonprofits doing all kinds of important work, from national security to the environment to poverty. And our focus is on helping the government be better at doing all of those things.
The COVID-19 vaccines available now are thanks in large part to Doctors Kizmakia, Corbett, and Barney Graham, Service to America Medals finalists who work at the National Institutes of Health. Over one weekend in January 2020, they created the basic design that lies at the heart of nearly all the successful COVID-19 vaccines in use today. Axios' Margaret Talev spoke with this team about that historic weekend and the years of diligent preparation that made it possible.
Thank you, Adrienne. And now I'm excited to introduce and say thanks to Dr. Kizmakia Corbett and Dr. Barney Graham. Welcome, doctors. It's great to see you both.
Thank you. Our pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Many Americans are just now getting to know each of your names, but you played a vital role in making it possible to get this exceptionally effective vaccine for COVID-19 in record time. You developed the basic structure for the vaccine, and you did it with record speed, but actually it was work that you'd begun in 2013 that enabled this. And Dr. Graham, I'm wondering if you could kind of kick us off by taking us back to 2013 and sharing that story with us.
I think a lot of the credit goes to all the work that's been done on HIV vaccine development over these last 20 to 40 years that has created a lot of the new technologies that we've taken advantage of. And in 2013, we were just before that, really in 2012, we were able to capture the pre-fusion structure of the RSV, respiratory syncytial virus fusion protein. The F protein is analogous to the spike protein. And what we learned was that if we could keep the protein in that original native functional pre-fusion conformation, it became a much better vaccine antigen. And as we developed that as a vaccine, which is still in phase 3 testing, we decided to also try this on other envelope viruses like paramyxoviruses viruses and coronaviruses. And so that's how we got into the coronavirus business.
And that was many years before coronavirus was something that was front of mind with all Americans. But Dr. Corbett, I'm wondering at what point in, I guess, January of 2020, did you and Dr. Graham realize that this research that you had been doing for many years could be applicable to what was about to become a pandemic?
I think that in true Dr. Graham form, he was thinking about all of the things that might be applicable even before we knew that it was a coronavirus. So I got an email from him on December 31st, 2019, stating that there was a respiratory virus outbreak in China. And I think what we understood about the VRC is that there are tons of respiratory viruses that are within our purview. So if it was, for example, pandemic flu, we could respond, but also if it was a pandemic coronavirus, we could also respond. And so once we realized that it was a coronavirus, I think that was in the early parts of January, we really knew what to do because we'd done the drill before several times over. The really interesting thing about what was now happening is that we had this long-term collaboration with Moderna, a biotechnology company, and they had the technology that would allow us to move even quicker than previous records that had been set by Dr. Graham et al. And so it was around the early parts of January that we realized that we had the basic scientific structure and also network in order to really pull off what is this rapid vaccine development.
Dr. Graham, I'm wondering, as you're doing this work together, you also must be watching the news and monitoring perhaps reports that the rest of us didn't have broad access to at the time, watching these numbers come out of China, numbers come out of Europe. At what point during the work with Moderna and the early development of the vaccine were you kind of watching the news, and did it feel like a race against time?
The decision to do this was made in 2017. And we had programs with Moderna for both the paramyxoviruses and the coronaviruses using prototype viruses, and had already shown that we could make a spike protein for the MERS coronavirus, deliver it by mRNA, protect mice from lethal challenge, and had already decided that if we had a threat in the future, we would run the drill and see how fast we could make a coronavirus vaccine. And so the plan was really set in motion in 2017 in order to run a drill for this prototype pathogen concept for pandemic preparedness that we thought was feasible with these new technologies that I mentioned earlier.
Dr. Corbett, if you hadn't been already now 3 years into planning on this, would it have been possible to pull together what became the vaccine in this kind of record time?
No, I don't think that this record speed would have been possible. But I think with all of the brains and also the really good hands of the people that do the experiments, we certainly would have got the job done. And we would have probably gotten it done just as well. But certainly we would not have had as much confidence going into this vaccine development process in the product that we were hopefully seeing through to this point where it's currently going into people's arms.
Dr. Graham, I want to ask you how you think that the speed and effectiveness of this vaccine's development has changed how the scientific community thinks about developing vaccines in general in the future. Is this going to have lasting impacts, and how?
I hope so. This has gone very rapidly. It's based on a lot of prior work, but it's gone rapidly, and it's, I think, set a new precedent for how things could be done. So the bar for future responses is going to be pretty high. And I don't know that we can always make a vaccine this quickly. I think for coronaviruses, we were in the best possible position because we had a generalizable approach that we knew would work on other coronaviruses. That's not exactly true for paramyxoviruses and other virus families that have the capacity to infect humans. So we went extremely fast because we didn't know what to do. We had pre-existing public-private partnerships, and we already had both antigen design concepts and rapid manufacturing platforms to work with. So in this case, we were ideally suited to rapidly respond. It wouldn't necessarily be this fast for other virus families. So we're hoping that the precedent for going fast, at least in the middle of a crisis, has been set. And we hope that some of the ways of thinking and some of the systems that have been put into place could be used in the future if needed.
And as we wrap up our conversation, Dr. Corbett, I just did want to ask you, how confident are you that this vaccine can keep up with any future mutations, and how closely are the two of you following the virus now a year and a half into its impact on our lives?
I follow the virus every day, just about like everyone else. I'm in tons of working groups that track mutations and also track the outbreaks, even being that they are so unfortunate all over the globe. And so we are fairly confident in this vaccine's ability to protect against the current variations of the virus. But, one of the major things that we want to do right now is, of course, just get it out to everyone that we can.
Doctors Corbett and Graham, I want to congratulate you both again on your award and thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. This week, we mark Public Service Recognition Week, an annual celebration of the contributions of public servants across the country. Since 1985, this special week has honored the federal, state, and local civil servants across the country who are accomplishing great things. Many of their achievements go unnoticed by the public, which is why this week is so important. Please join me in saying thank you to all public servants for their dedication to our communities and our country. You can learn more about Public Service Recognition Week and learn how to get involved at ourpublicservice.org/PSRW. Now, here's a little more about the Sammy's Award program organized by the Partnership for Public Service.
The focus on what's wrong in government usually crowds out coverage of the many things that are working well. You can find problems in any sector, but no organization gets better if all you do is kick it. We must recognize the best in government and foster the talents of the people whose work helps us all if we want our government to succeed.
For me personally, it really is an award that belongs to all of my colleagues.
For me, public service is all about giving other folks the opportunities that I got. And I have a lot of skin in this game, but what I really want to see is folks do well and that our patients are taken care of.
Your efforts are not self-centered. They're for the betterment of mankind. And the kind of feeling that you get when you accomplish something in that arena is just unparalleled to any feeling of gratification I've got for doing anything else in my life.
The 2020 census was the first conducted mostly online, and that presented a host of new challenges, including the threat of a flood of misleading or untrue information, the kind of thing that can spread easily online. Sammy's finalists, Zach Schwartz, and the Trust and Safety team at the Census Bureau worked tirelessly last year in partnership with fact checkers and other independent groups to combat misinformation and disinformation online surrounding the census.
And now I'm excited to introduce Zach Schwartz. Hi, Zach. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Zach, it seems to me that you had two parallel challenges in 2020, right? One was conducting a census in the middle of a pandemic, and the other was conducting a census in the middle of a climate where there really are political disagreements about which Americans should be counted, and some folks are motivated to try to find ways to discourage participation. And I'm wondering, which of those two was actually the bigger challenge, did you find?
For us, they both were very large challenges, but almost for different reasons, right? For starting on the first part about the pandemic, blowing up the schedule a bit and how we were able to conduct the count was very difficult. And huge kudos to obviously the entire census team for figuring out how to make sure that everyone was counted as a part of the census. Going door to door, pushing out our campaign as hard as we could, especially in the early days of COVID, when we really didn't want to send people out door to door, and making sure our advertising was on point, making sure it reached 99.9% of the population. I mean, those are the types of things that we really wanted to make sure were happening during the pandemic. When it came to the world that we lived in around mis and disinformation, making sure the information online was accurate, was authoritative content coming from the census was really important. And that was certainly a struggle. There was a lot of conversations out there. There was a lot of noise. And the 2020 Census Trust and Safety team really had to weed their way through and make sure we were pushing the authoritative content and working closely with our partners on Facebook, at Twitter, and all the social media companies on any content that appeared to be misinformation or disinformation and fighting against it.
You created the Trust and Safety team. You created something called the Fighting Census 2020 Rumors page. And you really developed a first in terms of working with some of the social media and tech companies around trying to stop the spread of misinformation, like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Wikipedia. Why did you decide this was needed, and what first tipped you off?
We recognized from 2010 census to the 2020 census, social media was completely different. The landscape was different. The use of it was different. And really looking and studying the elections in the past and how misinformation and disinformation really played a factor in people's opinions was something that was dangerous to getting a complete and accurate count for the census. And what we wanted to do was get ahead of that. We wanted to make sure that while the census only happens every 10 years, it is important for every year in between those 10 years. And for us, making sure that authoritative content was out there about why it's important to participate and what happens to those counts, not just your political representation, but billions upon billions of dollars every year in your local communities depends on your participation. That's what we wanted to push out there. And we were just concerned that there would be too many bad actors who would try to suppress the count. And for us, it was important that we fight against that, and we made sure, working closely with those companies, that their policies also stood out and said, you know what, you can't put content out there that suppresses the count. You can't put out content there that would encourage people not to participate. That is a violation of our terms of service. And I give the companies credit; they really took that and ran with it. And I think because of that, you're seeing some of those results, which are a very complete and accurate count that we got so far.
Did it end up being more a function of taking spurious information down, or of putting information out that could assuage people's concerns or rebut the rumors? I'm not really even sure how you measure that, but do you know whether more of your work ended up being going and pulling down bad actors as fast as possible, or whether it was confidence building and preemptively responding to some of these rumors?
It really was both. The content team and everything that our partners did, pushing out accurate and authoritative content, that was a huge win for us. And that certainly was the star of the show. But when it came to making sure that rumors didn't take off, when it came to concerns about who could participate, or that your information you shared with the census could be shared with other federal agencies or anyone for that matter, that really was a concern for us. And, we did see some of that content out there, but we quickly reacted, again, working closely with our tech companies to encourage them to say that is a violation of your terms of service and pulling that down. So it really did depend. There was both factors, but certainly pushing out authoritative content, having that authoritative content on our rumors page played a huge part in making sure that people knew where to go to get the right information, and they weren't fooled by mis or disinformation that maybe they saw on their timelines or news feeds.
I know you probably don't want to spend a lot of time putting out things that were never true to begin with, but some of the stranger rumors were that census takers were actually robbers who were going to come to your home. What were some of the rumors that were out there that you had to knock down?
And I know sometimes it sounds a little silly, but it could lead to horrific consequences, both from not getting a complete and accurate count to also leading people to fear a census taker or to retaliate or for some reason harm a census taker. So there were several things. We had that rumor, as you mentioned, where people claimed that there were false census takers going door to door and actually robbing their homes. And while you may think, oh, that sounds crazy, why would anyone think that? What ended up happening is that you had people who were concerned, rightfully so, that if an enumerator came to their home, they were going to have a weapon ready just in case it was a fake census taker, or their dogs were going to be ready. I mean, these were real concerns for hundreds of thousands of staff that we had on the field. So we had to take quick action on that. Another big rumor that, again, may sound a little odd was people were trying to basically say that if you, in order to get your stimulus check from the COVID-19 pandemic relief, you had to actually complete your census. And while you may think, wow, that's a great way to encourage participation, what's dangerous is that means that the census would have to share information with the Treasury Department or other federal agencies, which is against Title 13 and the law. And so for that, it was important that we fight that to make sure people knew that your information you gave to the census was secure and wasn't being shared. And that, again, helps grow the participation in some communities that may have been hesitant at that time.
The work you did, as we wrap up here, the work that you did also engaged you with many other agencies and departments in the federal government. Now that this is complete, how do you see misinformation and disinformation sort of impacting government going forward? And how are you working with other branches of the federal government to share some of the things that you learned this past year?
Yeah, we're really trying to make sure people understand that this is a real threat. Doesn't matter if you're talking about COVID, doesn't matter if you're talking about military recruitment. There's all kinds of things that spar mis and disinformation. And we're closely working with counterparts across the government to share best practices and to share why this is something that they should be fighting, to make sure the government's authoritative message and correct message, therefore, is the one that's being heard on social media platforms in the communities so that that information is accurate.
Facts matter. Zach Schwartz, I want to congratulate you again on this award and to thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you for having me.
The early weeks of the pandemic were marked by thousands upon thousands of layoffs, and as unemployment soared, many families struggled to make ends meet. When Congress passed the CARES Act last March, a specialized team at the IRS jumped into action to make sure families received their economic impact payments as quickly as possible. Over the course of last year, this team has overseen distribution of 3 rounds of checks to American families.
Well, now I'm excited to welcome our final finalist, Diane Garbotto, who, along with her colleagues Virginia Busby and Camille Privet, are the Sammys finalists for their extraordinary effort. Hi, Diane.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Well, we're so glad that you could join us for this conversation. You are, of course, one of the 3 leaders of the now infamous or famous IRS economic income payment effort. And all Americans who receive stimulus can thank you and your colleagues for the Get My Payment application. It sounds so obvious after the fact, right? But this was something that had to be created. And I'm wondering if you can talk to us about how it actually came together.
Sure. So it sounds obvious, but it's not as obvious as you would think it is. So, for us, this all began with the legislation, the passing of the legislation. And the first step for that is for us to make sure that we have an understanding of what was included in the legislation and start writing what we call business requirements. And that really helps our information technology division create their programming. So we really do like a line by line analysis of the law to ensure that we have the requirements. So Certainly once we could create a payment, right? And everybody thinks that we just have a big button at the IRS where we can press a button and issue payments. We have to create a process that allows us to put a credit on somebody's account and then from there make a payment. So because of the situation with the pandemic, it was really important to all of us that we issue payments as expeditiously as possible, and that involves direct deposit. So if you file a tax return with the IRS and you're receiving a refund, we have direct deposit information for you. But if maybe you're paying a balance or you don't have any money that's owed, there's no money coming back to you, and we have no way to direct deposit that for you. So we send it out in a paper check. Lots of problems with paper checks in the middle of a pandemic, right? So you have to print the paper check. You have to mail a paper check. The U.S. Post Office was also affected by the pandemic. So really, it was all about communicating to the public for us how much we needed the direct deposit information, which really grew rise to the Get My Payment application. So it really served two purposes. One, if you were getting a payment, it told you when your payment was issued and where we were sending it, if it was coming by mail or if it was coming by direct deposit. But then for those folks that were targeted for a paper check, we were able to solicit information from you to allow us to send that to you direct deposit right to your bank account. So the minute the payment was there, you had access to it. So more than 14 million people actually used that application.
I was going to ask you if you could give us kind of a size and scope situation here, because there's millions of people. And I'm wondering, at the moment that you realized that there was going to be a stimulus payment, like, what was your first reaction? Was it excitement, or was it like horror? Because
it certainly was exciting. We were in the middle of filing season, so it was a little overwhelming for the Internal Revenue Service. We knew the legislation was coming, and we knew that it was going to be a bigger scope than we had ever issued before, because we've done stimulus payments in the past. What was really different about this particular one was, of course, we were in a pandemic, right? So all of our phones were down. Our folks weren't working. We were personally being affected by the pandemic, with friends and relatives and coworkers being affected by the pandemic. But so it was personal for each and every one of us, right? So even though we were working towards getting the payment out as fast as possible, we really had to be nimble and think about, in this instance, it was different because you didn't have to have a tax return on file with the IRS. And that's a challenge for the IRS. We know who you are because we have a tax return. When we don't have your return on file, it's a challenge for us. So we really had to come up with some creative ways of letting people know how to let us know that you were eligible for a payment. So we worked a lot with other federal agencies like the Social Security Administration, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Railroad Retirement Board to identify benefit recipients who might be eligible, and found ways to bring their information in securely, and then worked with our information technology group again to create that programming to issue payments to them. And then on top of that, of course, issued payments to folks with tax returns on file. So a lot of challenge there. So the scope was huge. The pressure was immense, but we always rise to the challenge, and we knew it was really necessary. So I think we were excited. We were a little daunted, maybe, but it was a little daunting. But the Internal Revenue Service, we usually rise to the challenge when we're asked to serve the public.
Were you able to get any feedback from the customers or the taxpayers or maybe the non-filers who were able to receive stimulus? I know sometimes when you create something like this, like you want to understand, were people able to get their money? Did things go well? Did it help them? Like, were you able to stay in touch with any of the folks who received stimulus?
Well, fortunately, we were able to stay in touch with the agencies that issued their benefits. So we did hear, that they were receiving the money successfully and that type of feedback. But we also monitored social media to see where people were saying, celebrating, hey, I got my payment, or where there were pain points. So with the call sites being down, again, our folks weren't working either. It was a challenge for us to get that immediate feedback. So social media turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Some days you didn't want to hear it, right? Sometimes there wasn't good news out there. But when we had the opportunity to hear how we were helping people, hey, I can pay my rent. And, even if it was just I can go to the store and buy my essentials now, it was great to hear those successes out there.
I'm curious how much of this can be lasting now. You have obviously a larger database of information about people's direct deposit, ways to reach non-filers as well as filers. Is that going to help with IRS efficiencies going forward, or do you have to dump all that information and start over again next time?
Well, banking information changes, but we certainly learned a lot from this. So we certainly first of all, we were able to leverage that same information from the EIP1. We've done that now 2 more times, right? We've had EIP2 and EIP3, and a lot of that information we were able to reuse or get updated information. So that was fantastic. I think really what we have created is pathways for other agencies like SSA, VA, and RRB, the Railroad Retirement Board, to come into the IRS and share information with us. There's always a challenge when you're dealing with other federal agencies' databases. None of our databases are exactly the same. And so it's an art form to be able to bring that information in and mold it so that it can be used in your own system. So I think for the most part, we have some immediate quick wins. If there's another stimulus, we'll certainly leverage that same information. We learned the importance of having a tool available that allows you to add direct deposit. And I think that can be applied in so many ways now. So I think it's really the lessons learned and how nimble we were able to be. The federal government sometimes feels like it's not that nimble. So it's fantastic to see we got the Get My Payment app up and working in weeks. Really, this was not something that we dusted off. We were able to kind of take some core programming that already existed and adapt it and change it and make it fit the need. And I think we'll be able to repurpose that again and again. So really excited to see when you can move quickly, that it's not one and put up on a shelf. It's something that you can continue to learn and grow from and repurpose.
Well, thanks again, Diane Garbotto, for your time with this conversation, and congratulations to you and your colleagues on your award.
Thank you. On behalf of myself, Virginia Busby, and Camille Privet, we're just really grateful and honored to be here.
Thanks, Margaret. Congratulations to all of the finalists for their incredible work. Here now with his own words of appreciation for this year's Sammys finalists and the more than 2 million federal employees around the country, President Joe Biden.
This week is Public Service Recognition Week. And in this year of peril and promise, there's a lot to recognize. Scientists, doctors, nurses, other health officials who are keeping us safe and healthy during this pandemic, developing and administering vaccinations, professionals in small business administration, who are making sure the small businesses get loans, stay afloat, and the officials at the Treasury Department who are making sure that families receive rescue plan checks that are such an important lifeline for so many people. The dedicated individuals at the VA who are taking care of those who served us in uniform. The teams at NOAA and FEMA who help predict and respond to severe weather. Everyone at NASA who have inspired us by landing a rover and flying a helicopter on Mars and showing that anything is possible in America. The list goes on. Every day, hundreds of thousands of public servants and their families are reminding us that our government isn't some foreign force in the distant capital. It's all of us. It's we, the people. And our nation's public servants are not only making sure our government works, they're making sure it works for all of us, for you, your families, and the communities you live in. I want to thank the Partnership for Public Service for honoring and recognizing our fellow Americans for their service to our country. And I'm honored to congratulate all the finalists for the 2021 Samuel J. Heyman Service to America Medals, the Sammys. Now, this is the 20th anniversary of the Sammys. These awards aren't just the Oscars of public service, they're a reminder that public service is noble, impactful, an impactful profession. And I hope that they'll encourage more young people to consider careers in public service. When you hear the stories and achievements of these honorees, you'll know why we should be so proud of this country. We're made of fellow Americans who do extraordinary things. So thank you for all you do, and many of you will continue to do. Congratulations to the Sammy winners.
If you want to learn more about all of this year's Samuel J. Heyman Service to America Medals finalists, you can find their profiles at servicetoamericamedals.org or by following the Partnership for Public Service on Twitter at Public Service. And now is your chance to get involved in the Sammys. Voting is open for the People's Choice Award. Between now and July 2nd, you can vote for your favorite finalists at servicetoamericamedals.org. The People's Choice winner will be announced in late July. On behalf of Axios and the Partnership for Public Service, I'm Adrienne Warren. Thank you so much for watching.